There are 12 cities where criminals of all levels feel at home, like masters, and the authorities are even happier the more crimes they've committed. Sounds a bit strange, right? Let me explain. All these 12 cities are run by Democrats. Memphis, St. Louis, Detroit, Baltimore, Chicago, Cleveland, Oakland. Drug dealers roam freely there. Gangsters extort money from businesses. And there are lots of weapons in the hands of armed criminals. That's why armed assaults are not uncommon there, and weapons are mostly taken away from law-abiding citizens. What do these cities have in common? That the Democratic Party, once it seizes power, holds on to it for decades. In Chicago, there hasn't been anyone else for 90 years, only Democrats. They don't let anyone else in. Imagine that there are real elections there. How could you imagine that? It's impossible, right? But no one can bring them to justice, neither the state nor the feds. That's called democracy. If it's not clear to anyone yet, I'm not a big fan of the way of governing called democracy. It's an idiotic way to govern, an idiotic way to run any organization, society, or even a country. Well, if the majority likes it, take off your pants. In New York, it's been Democrats for over 45 years, and in Philadelphia, 70 years one party. Which Democratic Party? And these are the cities with the highest level of danger for residents. It's beneficial for the Democrats to keep the poor in the ghettos and for them to remain poor. It's also very profitable for them. Then they vote for handouts. When they're not poor, they vote so their taxes aren't taken away. But when they're poor, they vote for others to have things taken from them and given to themselves. And along the way, of course, our guys or their guys naturally take their own cut as well. That's it. In addition, they also persuade people in these cities using the media and other means. So, does that mean those people are to blame for the dire situation of the city and the plight of these people to whom they, the Democrats, are giving handouts? The ones to blame are the business owners who pay little and the landlords for whose apartments they have to pay so much. If they don't pay, they're evicted. Not paying is my fault, but eviction is his responsibility. Crime in blue cities. Blue is just the color of the Democratic Party. I didn't mean anything by it. It caught the attention of Trump, who understands well that this problem can be solved. It can be solved by significantly reducing crime. It's clear that crime can't be completely eradicated, but it can be reduced, and significantly so. But the federal government formally does not have the right to interfere in the affairs within the states. The District of Columbia, and therefore the nation's capital, Washington, have a different status. We have 50 states plus the District of Columbia. They sort of have a federal status. That doesn't matter right now. It just means it's not exactly a state. And there, the White House could easily send the National Guard to help the police. Washington, by the way, the city of Washington itself has also been under the control of the Democratic Party for a long time. Most of the population there are officials who work in government institutions. Republicans always try to cut both their numbers and salaries, and the Democrats take money from the producers and give it to the officials, which is why they get their votes. But in Washington, Trump managed to reduce car thefts by as much as 80%. Since the start of the operation, there hasn't been a single murder. More than 1,000 people have been detained, and over 100 weapons have been confiscated from the criminals. There is another common feature in these particularly dangerous cities. All of these cities are sanctuary cities. That is, the city council of such a city declares that the city authorities will not apprehend and will not cooperate with the federal authorities in detaining and deporting illegal immigrants. This is mainly done to attract illegal immigrants to these cities and by increasing the population to get more seats in Congress. And illegal immigrants naturally started pouring into these cities, And along with the illegal immigrants came additional crimes. First, crime increased. Second, healthcare services got worse. They might not go to doctors, but when something happens, they immediately go to the emergency room. That is, to the emergency room urgent care and so on. They overcrowded the schools because they brought a bunch of kids with them, or the kids just came without any adults at all. Well, later on, those kids were actually taken into slavery, so to speak, either for sexual exploitation or to work on some marijuana plantations, or to sew something, or to sweep and so on. They worked there for 12 to 14 hours a day and got nothing for it except food. Well, that's all Biden's business. 350,000 children have been let into our country without parents over 4 years, and someone gave those children to someone. Who did they give them to? No traces, no traces. I've already talked about this. Well, in California, for example, during a raid in a semi-underground marijuana operation, they found 8 such children who were being kept there as slaves. They weren't literally chained, but were confined and couldn't leave. No documents, money, or freedom. And of course, they don't speak English, so it's just absolutely wonderful. So what's happening in these cities? Crime is rising and medical care and schools are overcrowded, but it's other children, not these, who are filling the schools. And this has pushed out, let's say, less educated Americans who used to do all kinds of manual labor. And legal immigrants are simply willing to take less money, so to speak, and work longer hours, let's say. When Trump announced that he was ready to send National Guard troops to 19 cities across the United States, including New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago, the Democratic Party rose up in protest, trying to portray this move as an attempt at an armed takeover of America. Mayors and governors, senators, and liberal activists called this a crime, yet another crime by Trump, naturally ignoring the fact that in their cities people are being killed, raped, robbed, and beaten, both residents and visitors. A long weekend has just passed. Yes, 3 days off, so the third day, Labor Day, a long weekend has passed. Here are the results in Chicago.
The Labor Day weekend was marked by gun violence. 8 people were killed, more than 50 wounded in Chicago. This includes 2 mass shootings. That's when there are 4 or more victims. In response, President Trump posted a message on his Truth Social account. It was, quote, "He better get it sorted out quickly or we will come." This refers to Illinois Governor J. Robert Pritzker.
You saw the demonstration. These are Chicago Democrats. They paid several thousand people to protest against fighting crime. They paid them to protest against efforts to fight crime.
There was no official notice about the deployment of the military here. But Governor and Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson are resisting.
If Trump and the federal government are really serious about reducing violence in Chicago, why is he holding back more than $800 million for violence prevention?
So it turns out that Trump wants to bring violence to the streets of Chicago, as if there isn't any without him.
Look at your screen. Huge Labor Day protest in downtown Chicago as Mayor Brandon Johnson tells President Donald Trump no troops in Chicago. This follows the Trump administration's plan to send officers to Chicago to crack down on immigration. In the latest move to expand the presence of federal law enforcement in major cities run by Democrats.
Let's bring in Johnny Lom from Fox 32 Chicago for the latest on this developing story. Johnny, always a pleasure. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, you may have heard about the weekend in Chicago about the gun violence. The numbers are alarming and public safety is a top priority in Chicago. But thousands of Chicago residents have made it clear that they are against the National Guard patrolling here. The protesters marched to the Haymarket Memorial, where the labor movement began. Here in Chicago, they protested against President Trump's threats to send the National Guard to Chicago to fight crime.
These fat, unpleasant people with grim faces are protesting against Trump's initiative to stop crime. And specifically on the streets of their own city. That is, don't touch our thieves and our murderers and our, I don't even know who else, rapists. By no means should you touch them. Could you have come up with something like that, right? Even for a movie script, this is so fantastic that no one would believe it. Well, 20 years ago, if you made a movie script like that, they'd say it's a science fiction film.
This morning, a group of military veterans and lawyers stated that deploying the National Guard here would be illegal. This group includes some National Guard veterans who claim that this is an inappropriate use of the National Guard. That's why another demonstration on this issue is taking place in downtown Chicago.
By the way, at the end of the video, I'll explain the title Pora Duyetes. Why do they think that if someone was in the army, they're smart? It's like listening to an actor's advice on international politics, or listening to Shendrovich or Bykov evaluating military actions on the fields of Ukraine, or explaining to us the mistakes Donald Trump made in negotiations. But I have to either please or disappoint our Democratic colleagues. Federal agents are already in Chicago.
Breaking news is coming in that federal agents are already in Chicago and the National Guard will arrive in just a few hours. And we can already see the Democrats switching sides. Another high-ranking Democrat from Chicago is siding with Trump. He's begging for help from the National Guard. Meanwhile, their own helpless mayor has completely lost control of their city.
Thank God there are Democrats who care not only about their own stomachs and wallets, but also about their city. By the way, at the end I will tell you how Trump's actions, based on common sense, will lead to a complete change in the political map of the United States of America. I mean, millions of people who could never have imagined voting against their party, with the Democratic Party, of course, yes. Suddenly they see that their party is against them. The party hangs like a heavy stone around the necks of their children and grandchildren, and with the Democratic Party at the helm, the country is simply cheerfully rushing to the bottom. At the end of this episode, I'll lay everything out for you. By the way, gentlemen, 2 short announcements. The first is that we plan to hold a meeting with all sponsors within the next week, 2 at most. Questions, answers, discussions, and most importantly, where to go next, what is most interesting, in what format is it most interesting, and what is not interesting at all. Since we have sponsors, the people who help us, we want to hear their opinions. And as they say, we will respond to their help with our charm and willingness to do what they suggest. To become a sponsor, you need to follow the link below in the description and subscribe for $4 a month. You can do more, you can do 16, maybe 32, maybe 64, maybe 128, moving on. I'm too lazy to count. Your help is simply invaluable. And secondly, remember that everything will be explained in the end, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, the secret will be revealed. So right there where the sponsorship is, you can also find a link to the book, a completely free book. It's called Capitalism 101. Sounds pretty heavy, doesn't it? No, it's not heavy at all. It's actually a collection of my stories about how to build the world. Well, stories, not just dry information. But by downloading this book, you also get access to a completely free video series called The Road to Freedom. Every day in the morning, I think in the morning, you'll receive a 10-minute video free. Once again, yes. But if you want, you can pay. By the way, you can say yes, there is an option to pay here. And a daily 10-minute video with historical, let's say, anecdotes, fascinating and entertaining philosophy, lessons on how to build relationships in the family, at work, with friends, and how to succeed in business when others can't manage to do it. It's all fun, filled with humor and surprising facts. You'll enjoy it, right? But let's get back to our topic. So, not to let crime be stopped. Like, we'll die, but we won't let our murderers, rapists, drug addicts, and thieves be offended.
As you know, President Trump has just sent more than 2,200 National Guard troops to Washington, District of Columbia, and the crime rate has dropped by an astonishing 84%. Now he's threatening to do the same thing in Chicago, and the Democratic leadership there is in a complete panic. But the numbers don't lie. This Labor Day weekend, 54 people were shot and 7 were killed.
That's twice as many victims as last year.
And footage from Chicago looks like a war zone. Now, immigration and customs enforcement agents have been in Chicago for the past few weeks, cracking down on illegal immigration. As part of President Trump's order to triple immigration and customs enforcement arrest quotas to 3,000 a day nationwide, Chicago has seen a sharp increase in enforcement. In fact, in just the past few months, there have been more than 5,000 immigration and customs enforcement arrests in Chicago.
And this federalization of the law focused on illegals is now expanding to deal with uncontrolled crime in general.
And their unlucky mayor, Brandon Johnson, is throwing a real tantrum about it. Take a look.
No federal troops in the city of Chicago. No paramilitary forces in the city of Chicago. We will defend our democracy in the city of Chicago. We will defend the humanity of every person in the city of Chicago.
Now, unfortunately for Mayor Johnson, even his fellow Democrats are starting to back down, and they're begging Trump to send in federal troops to stop the carnage.
Democrat Alderman Raymond Lopez, who is publicly breaking with his own party, is urging his fellow Democrats to work with President Trump to address the problem of uncontrolled crime in Chicago.
We need to work on making sure we coordinate with each other.
The mayor of Chicago or the governor of Illinois can easily pick up the phone and get in touch with the president of the United States and say, what can we do to be on the same page?
We must work to continually reduce the number of victims in our city and state.
Instead, we get involved in pointless arguments on social media, which only puts the residents of Chicago and Illinois in the spotlight for criminals who use this time to take advantage of the situation and go on a rampage. As we continue to see this weekend, when there were several mass shootings and many victims, and no one wants to talk about it. I hear the governor talking about invasion, insurrection. I hear the mayor issuing useless orders against the federal government. But what no one is talking about is if our crime statistics are going down, why can't we lower them even more with the help of Donald Trump?
How many victims are we okay with?
Because ultimately, the subtext of what the mayor and the governor are saying is that they're satisfied with the number of victims we have right now.
We don't need to improve our numbers. Moving on, to be continued.
But it really reminds me of the Ukrainian leadership. We'll sacrifice another million of our people. We'll send everyone to the front. Let all Ukrainians die, but we won't give up a single inch of land to the invader. It's the same in Chicago. Let people die by the hundreds and thousands. We won't let Trump strengthen our police because then they'll kick out our beloved illegals, the ones we used to rule America, those sweet and fluffy ones from the United States, which of course we absolutely don't want. I'm not talking about myself, but about the Democrats. It's actually simple. If Trump manages to deal with the crime in Chicago, Los Angeles, Memphis, and St. Louis, people will realize that for 30, 40, maybe even 90 years, they were deceived, that this problem could have been solved long ago, but instead they preferred to let people be killed and robbed. In order to hold on to power, on television channels where the name Trump was only mentioned with insults, they started to change their approach.
You have leaders in Chicago who see this, like you said, we've been reading about this for years every weekend, and maybe crime has gone down. Last week, the mayor of Chicago said, we don't need more police officers, and that police aren't the solution. And, you know, I think he said no 5 times. Look at what's happening this weekend. Just look at that. You know, I think J.B. Pritzker should do something radical. I think he should pick up the phone, call the president, and say, you know what, let's do it.
And I know that you don't have the constitutional authority to deploy the National Guard here and patrol my. You can do it in Washington, but you can't do it in Chicago. But let's cooperate. These are the most dangerous parts of my state.
We would like to understand how to create a partnership that is constitutional, that respects the balance of federalism between the federal government and the state government. And let's work together to save lives.
Because right now, there's simply nothing to see here. Let's move on. There's no problem here.
Hey, Donald Trump, we don't need your help. And, you know, the mayor talks about how we will protect the dignity of people in our city, but protect their lives. That's what it means to protect their dignity. You know, it would be radical for us to find a way to actually do what I've been talking about from the very beginning in Washington, namely to see politicians create partnerships that protect their people.
That
It turned out that these talking heads actually have brains. They were just very, very good at hiding them. Republicans.
Basically, Republicans aim to govern according to reality, while Democrats try to impose a radical ideology on reality. That's the key difference. Republicans want to govern according to reality, while Democrats want to impose a radical ideology on reality.
And that's what really scares the Democrats about all of this. The reason why the Democrats are so scared is because they know if Trump is able to effectively restore order in our cities, just like he closed the border and is bringing order to Washington, Democratic voters will inevitably turn away from them.
That I just told you recently, right? Right.
The system is irreparable, so it should be replaced with a more Marxist one.
But if Trump can solve the problem, if the problems are not related to the system, if he can use the system to solve the problem, then he disproves the claim of the cultural Marxists, just like he disproved the claim that Congress is needed to secure the border.
To pass legislation.
You didn't need new legislation. No, you didn't need a new system. You just needed a new president. You just needed new leadership.
To break down the zombie-like wall of propaganda that infects our mainstream media and the political establishment. And that's exactly what Trump promises to do here. And his law and order policies even revive the old Republican version. Joe Scarborough, it's amazing, on MSNBC of all places.
So obviously we're going to be watching very closely, keeping an eye on how things develop here.
But again, law and order is becoming a key theme for Trump, one that quickly unites the overwhelming majority.
This goes far beyond Washington. This goes far beyond Chicago. Law and order could ultimately politically realign the nation like never before.
What do people want most from the government? Security. That's the first thing we need. Everything else comes after, but the main function of the government is to protect the people. If the country sees that Trump brings confidence in the future, both economically and in terms of security, then what is it that we're waiting for? The women of America who were scared by Trump will go out and vote. They'll vote for him, not for those who lied to them for years. Men are already with Trump, and now women will join too. And this will mark the end of the Democratic Party as we know it. If in 2026, black women, just like protecting them, black men will go for Trump, if Latino men's wives join their husbands, the Democratic Party will most likely split into two parties, one radical, Komsomol fascist, absolutely white with small black streaks, and the other a moderate centrist party. Of course, I would prefer a new, not centrist party, but rather two strong pro-capitalist parties that would compete for the best path for the country toward freedom and a free market. But even just getting rid of these pro-communists and the completely brainless graduates of American liberal arts colleges will be a great relief. And then we'll take on education. First, to throw out the unnatural nonsense they're teaching our children, teenagers from the youngest age, and then to introduce the right subjects, which would be called common sense. That's all, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much. Goodbye.